Becoming a United States citizen is a significant dream for many people. It represents the final step in a long and often difficult journey. This process, known as naturalization, is more than just filling out forms and passing a test. It is about showing that you are ready to embrace the responsibilities and values of this country. One of the most important requirements you must meet is proving you have good moral character. This concept is a cornerstone of U.S. immigration law. It is the government's way of ensuring that new citizens are individuals who respect the laws and the rights of others in their community. It is a fundamental part of your application that USCIS will look at very closely. The law describes good moral character as character that measures up to the standards of average citizens in the community where the applicant lives. This isn't a standard of perfection, but rather a legal benchmark rooted in the Immigration and Nationality Act. It's about demonstrating that you are a responsible, decent, and trustworthy individual who is prepared to uphold the laws and values of the United States. The entire naturalization process is, in many ways, an assessment of this fundamental quality, ensuring that new citizens are fit for the profound responsibilities that come with citizenship. Essentially, it means you are a person who follows the law, is honest, and treats others with fairness and respect. A USCIS officer will make this determination by looking at the totality of the circumstances. They aren't just looking for a single mistake, they are evaluating your entire record for a consistent pattern of responsible behavior. This includes everything from your application and supporting documents to your testimony during the interview. Honesty is paramount. Lying or intentionally concealing information to gain an immigration benefit is one of the most severe negative factors. If you have made mistakes in your past, the officer will also look for evidence of rehabilitation, proof that you have learned from those errors and have since established a positive record of conduct. Your conduct is primarily evaluated during what's known as the statutory period, usually the 5 years before you apply for citizenship, or 3 years if you are married to a U.S. citizen. This is the most critical window of time. However, a common and costly mistake is assuming that conduct before this period is irrelevant. An officer can and will look at your entire record. A serious crime committed 7 or 10 years ago can absolutely be grounds for a denial. It's also vital to remember that the requirement for good moral character does not end when you file your application. It continues all the way through your interview and right up until the moment you take the oath of allegiance. Any disqualifying act committed during this waiting period can jeopardize your entire path to citizenship. Crucially, good moral character is not about your personal beliefs, religion, or political opinions. You have the right to your own thoughts and beliefs. What USCIS is concerned with are your actions and conduct. The law outlines specific behaviors that can prevent you from establishing good moral character. Some are permanent bars, such as being convicted of murder or an aggravated felony. Others are conditional bars that can lead to a denial, like having multiple convictions with jail sentences totaling 5 years or more. Beyond major crimes, officers will scrutinize other areas. Have you lied to the government to gain any immigration benefit? Have you failed to pay your legally required taxes or child support? Did you fail to register for the Selective Service if you were required to? These actions are seen as a failure to uphold the responsibilities expected of a resident, and therefore can be a barrier to becoming a citizen. At the heart of the naturalization process is a fundamental yet often complex requirement: establishing good moral character. This isn't just about avoiding a criminal record, it's a broad standard that reflects the values and principles of the United States. Essentially, USCIS wants to see that you are a person who respects the laws and the moral fabric of the nation you wish to join. In recent years, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has issued updated policy guidance that significantly clarifies and, in many ways, tightens the scrutiny applied to this standard. This memo doesn't necessarily create new laws, but it consolidates and refines how officers evaluate an applicant's entire history, placing a greater emphasis on a comprehensive, case-by-case analysis. What does this thorough review actually entail? It means that the USCIS officer will look beyond just the final disposition of a court case. The updated guidance empowers them to consider the totality of the circumstances surrounding an applicant's conduct. This is a critical distinction. For example, an arrest for shoplifting, even if the charges were later dismissed or you completed a diversion program, can still be a factor. The officer isn't looking at whether you were legally found guilty, but whether the underlying act itself, the act of stealing, reflects poorly on your character. They will scrutinize police reports, court documents, and your own testimony to build a complete picture of your conduct during the statutory period and in some cases even before. The law recognizes that certain offenses are so fundamentally contrary to American values that they create an automatic, non-negotiable barrier to citizenship. These are known as statutory bars because they are explicitly listed in the Immigration and Nationality Act. If an applicant has committed one of these acts, a USCIS officer has no discretion. They are required by law to deny the application. These bars represent Congress's judgment that certain conduct permanently or temporarily disqualifies an individual from the privilege of becoming a U.S. citizen. The most severe statutory bar is a conviction for an aggravated felony on or after November 29, 1990. This is a permanent lifetime bar to establishing good moral character. It's crucial to understand that the term aggravated felony is a specific immigration law definition and is much broader than its everyday meaning. It includes obvious, serious crimes like murder, rape, or illicit trafficking in drugs or firearms. However, it also encompasses a wide range of other offenses, including certain theft or fraud offenses where the sentence was a year or more, crimes of violence, and even some offenses that might be classified as misdemeanors under state law. The consequences are absolute. A single conviction for an aggravated felony will permanently prevent you from ever becoming a U.S. citizen. Beyond the automatic statutory bars lies a vast gray area governed by officer discretion. These are situations involving discretionary bars. Unlike statutory bars, these do not trigger an automatic denial. Instead, the USCIS officer must conduct a balancing test. They weigh the negative factors, the unlawful acts or negative conduct, against the positive equities in your case. This is where the totality of the circumstances review truly comes into play. The officer will consider factors such as how recent the conduct was, the severity of the act, and whether it was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. Crucially, they will also look for evidence of reform and rehabilitation. So what are some common discretionary issues? The failure to support dependents or the willful failure to pay taxes are classic examples. An officer may see this not just as a financial issue, but as a failure to uphold fundamental civic and familial responsibilities. However, it's not always an open and shut case. If you have entered into a payment plan with the IRS or a child support agency and are current on your payments, this demonstrates responsibility and can mitigate the negative factor. Other common red flags include driving under the influence, even a single offense, as it shows a disregard for public safety. Lying or providing false testimony at any point in the immigration process is extremely serious. Even failing to register for the Selective Service if you were required to can be a bar. The key takeaway is that any act that suggests a disregard for the law, a lack of honesty, or poor judgment can be used by an officer to make a negative discretionary finding on your character. Once you file your Form N-400, you initiate one of the most comprehensive background checks conducted by the U.S. government. It begins with your biometrics appointment, where your fingerprints and photograph are taken. Your fingerprints are immediately sent to the FBI to be cross-referenced against their vast criminal justice databases. This check will uncover your entire criminal history, including arrests, charges, and convictions, even if they were expunged. Simultaneously, your information is run through interagency checks with the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and other intelligence agencies to build a complete picture of your background. This deep dive extends to your complete immigration file. USCIS will meticulously reconstruct your history using its own records and the arrival and departure information system. They will see every entry and exit, verifying you meet the strict continuous residence and physical presence requirements. More importantly, they will compare the information on your N-400 to every previous application you've ever filed. Any inconsistency will be flagged. For example, if you claim to be single on a past visa application but your N-400 states you were married at that time, you will be required to explain this discrepancy under oath. The naturalization interview is the culmination of this investigation. It is a formal legal proceeding. When you raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, you are under oath. Any intentionally false statement you make from that point forward constitutes false testimony. This includes concealing relevant facts or providing misleading information, known as material misrepresentation. Providing false testimony is a statutory bar to citizenship, meaning the law requires the officer to deny your application. The officer is trained to ask probing questions to test the consistency and truthfulness of your application against the data they have already collected. The officer will also scrutinize every piece of evidence you provide, from tax returns to marriage certificates, checking for signs of fraud. If any part of your application or testimony raises questions or lacks sufficient proof, the officer may issue a request for evidence or RFE. An RFE is a formal request for additional documentation to clarify a specific issue. For instance, if your tax filings conflict with your stated marital history, you might receive an RFE asking for amended returns or a detailed explanation. Responding to an RFE completely and before the deadline is critical to keeping your application moving forward. This brings us to the single most important principle: be truthful. The consequences of dishonesty almost always outweigh the potential damage of the original issue. Consider this: an applicant had a minor, isolated arrest years ago that was dismissed. Hiding it is a deliberate lie and grounds for denial based on a lack of good moral character. Disclosing it, providing the certified court records, and explaining it honestly, however, demonstrates integrity. While the underlying issue will be considered, the act of being truthful is paramount. An honest mistake, like misremembering a date, can often be corrected. A deliberate lie to gain an immigration benefit cannot. Your dream of becoming a U.S. citizen is achievable, but it demands diligence and integrity. Being proactive is key. Before you file, gather all your records, review your entire immigration history, and if you have any doubts or complex situations, it is wise to consult with an experienced immigration attorney. By understanding the rigorous vetting process, addressing potential issues head-on, and committing to complete honesty, you can navigate the path successfully. This journey of diligence and truthfulness culminates in the oath of allegiance, where you can proudly and deservedly take your place as a new citizen of the United States.